Hello and welcome to this episode of Bake It Up a Notch Bite Size. I'm Erin Jeanne McDowell and I am especially excited for today's episode because we are making my Brie bites from my brand new book, Savory Baking. In my new book, Savory Baking, I have a chapter called Bites. This is one of my favorite chapters in the book because it's full of so much yummy, bite-sized party food. So this is great for any kind of party you're having, anytime you're having a crowd get together. These are the recipes you're gonna wanna make, and today we're making one of my favorites, which are sort of like a version of that delicious brie and croûte or puff pastry wrapped brie that we sometimes make for holidays this time of year, but this is individual. This is just little bite-sized ones, and they are so delicious, and I can't wait to dive in. As always, the recipe is linked in the video description below, so you can follow along there, and let's get baking. For this recipe, we are gonna start with my rough puff pastry. This is just a regular batch of my rough puff pastry. We've already talked about that several times here on Bake It Up a Notch. So if you wanna learn how to make it, go back and check out some of those episodes where we dive into it a little bit deeper. And of course, if you're not feeling like making your own pastry, this is one time where you could definitely use a high quality puff pastry from the store and just roll it out to the size that I'm about to direct you. Now, this is kind of meant to be a nod to that traditional baked brie, though that traditional baked brie often has things like honey or some preserves, some jam, something like that in it. And I'm kind of taking it to a more savory place by using a little bit of pepper jelly. Now, hot pepper jelly is one of my favorite ingredients. A lot of people from the Midwest are probably gonna know what I'm talking about, and the South. Pepper jelly is sweet and spicy, so delicious, and it has so many wonderful applications. In my new book, Savory Baking, I have a recipe to make it yourself, but it's also something you can get at a grocery store or a gourmet shop. It's often kind of in the cheese section of grocery stores, so you can kind of look for it there. I'm gonna start by rolling this dough out to a little bit wider than 9 inches by 15 inches. And this is sort of how I guide people to roll out dough all throughout the book, is think of the size that you need to get it to and then just make it slightly bigger than that, because then we can trim it to that exact size very easily without worrying about it shrinking. You know, so often a recipe will tell you to roll it out to 10 by 10, and then as soon as you cut it into that 10 by 10 square, it shrinks and it's more like a 9 by 9 square. So just always roll it out a little bit bigger than you need and then just trim it, and you're gonna have the exact right width and thickness. We're rolling it out to 9 by 15 inches or 23 by 38 centimeters. And we're kind of trying to get it about 1/4 of an inch thick. Once we get it rolled to the correct size, it's going to be the right thickness. So the size is what we'll focus on here. Okay, I think I'm getting pretty close here. Yep, okay, so I'm at about 10 by 16. So now I'm just going to trim it, trim a little bit off of each side. And the part of the reason I'm trimming it also is because I want to have nice, crisp, clean edges. You know, sometimes on Bake It Up a Notch, you're gonna see me making things, and I kind of don't mind that it has more ragged or jaggedy edges, but this is one time where I want it to be pretty spot on. And you'll see why as we start to shape these. Whenever you're trimming something, then you'll see like this side is a little bit more rounded and this side is pretty straight. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and just cut this side straight first. I'll have hardly any scrap there. And then I'll measure my 15 inches from this side. And see, it actually could stand to be a little bit more. This is when you can help the dough work for you by just encouraging it into the shape you want it to be. Perfect, that's gonna be great. Okay, awesome. Now I'm going to mark it. I'm gonna cut this into 3 3-inch strips vertically like this. I'm just gonna mark it with 3 and 6 and then cut it into strips. And we're then gonna cut it into 3-inch strips the other direction to make ourselves little 3-inch squares, which is gonna be the perfect size to wrap up our brie. talk about this brie, shall we? This recipe was actually inspired by the first time I found these little guys at the store. Look how cute they are. Oh my goodness, I only have eyes for these mini brie. They are so stinking cute. And what I love about them is that they really are a lovely rind to creaminess ratio. Really, really easy to use in this application. And you can find these at grocery stores like Trader Joe's or even Whole Foods often have them in with the cheese. They're individually wrapped. They're really fun for snacking too, but if you can't find them, never fear. We just wanna cut kind of similarly sized, like 1-inch cubes of brie, and you can leave the rind on just as this has its little rind on as well. Okay, now I'm gonna mark this again, 3 inches. So I'm going to add about a teaspoon. You don't want to go too heavy here because, again, this is a little spicy, so you want to make sure that we've got some balance, but we also just don't want it oozing out once we put the brie in. So I'm gonna just put a little dollop on each square. And you could definitely use other things here, caramelized onions, fig preserves, quince paste, even just some good whole grain mustard or something would be delicious. We're gonna use about 1/3 cup of pepper jelly in total for this recipe, so that gives you an idea. Okay, looking good. Now I'll start with my brie bites. I'll just go ahead and put those in the center and kind of smush them down. The jelly's gonna help them adhere nicely to the center. Perfection. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll kind of stretch the corner and bring it up on top of the brie. Then we'll take the next corner and we'll stretch it up, and if you need to, grab a little dollop of water, a little dot, and just put it there. That way you have something for that dough to hold to. Now again, we'll do the same thing. We'll stretch this out and bring it up to the top. We'll stretch this out and bring it up to the top. And when you're left, you have kind of these open bits. So what I like to do is pinch those together, and again, use a little water if you need to. Just pinch them together really nice. And then we can kind of do the same thing with those edge pieces. Just stretch them and bring them up to the top. Pinch, 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 and stretch. It's all pinching and stretching. That's all this recipe is. Okay, so I'm just gonna do that to the rest of these yummy pastries, and then we'll come back to show you how we're gonna finish them. Okay, if your bites are feeling at all sticky or soft, you can refrigerate them for a little while to firm that dough back up. But if they're ready to go in the oven, we're gonna give them an egg wash. And then I actually also like to finish them with a little fresh cracked black pepper on the top. And don't worry, one of the only mistakes that can happen with this recipe is some of that jelly leaching out. But if it does, it's going to caramelize around the base of the dough. It's going to caramelize on the baking sheet, and it's still going to be delicious. So just try your best to get a really, really good seal. But if some of it does leak out, it's gonna still be very yummy, I promise you. We're gonna bake these at 400 degrees Fahrenheit until they are really nice and golden brown on the outside and the cheese is so gooey on the inside, about 35 to 40 minutes. Check out these beautiful brie bites. I am so excited. And you can see, just like I said, a couple of these had a little bit of leakage, still delicious, still gonna eat them, but a few of them are like pretty stinking perfect. Like this one is pretty stinking perfect. I'm gonna eat that though. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead, put a few of these onto a little platter here. These are obviously great to serve warm. You do wanna let them cool a little bit, just from the standpoint of you've got molten jelly and brie inside. And if you made these ahead and you wanted to kind of re-warm them, you could just do that in a low oven, like maybe 300 or 325 for about 10-15 minutes would be enough to re-crisp them, warm them up a little bit. So you could bake them ahead of your party and then just kind of refresh them. And I'm peeling some of these pieces off because this is what I was talking about. If you do get any leakage, that's like the chef's treat right there. No one needs to know. And see this one, this is like probably the worst thing that can happen. We had a full explosion where the whole wheel of brie kind of slid itself out. But as you can see, it's still gonna be a delicious bite. So I'm gonna save that. That'll be one we can sample. Look at that. Look how beautiful. Imagine walking into a party or people walking into your house and it's smelling the way it smells in here right now. We haven't created smell-o-vision yet, but it smells amazing in here, just trust me. And just this is such a crowd-pleasing sort of thing. And best of all, no knives, no forks, none of that extra stuff. It's just kind of a great pass little hors d'oeuvre. I'm gonna take one of these. I think one of the reasons I love these so much is that it's like very much equal parts crust to brie. And for me, that's really what I'm looking for. Look how flaky. The more I shake my head, the more you know I like it. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Bake It Up a Notch Bite Size, where we made my brie bites. These are such a great thing to make around the holiday season, but honestly, there's so many more amazing bite recipes in my new book, Savory Baking. This is just one of them. So I can't wait for you to get your hands on it and dive in and taste all of the pastry wrapped goodness that is inside. As always, this recipe is linked in the video description below, so head down there for all this goodness. And do me a favor, if you like things wrapped in puff pastry, please click like and subscribe so you can be made aware of all of our new episodes as they become available. Our next episode is all about cookies, and I can't wait. Until then, as always, happy baking. It's honestly the kind of thing I'd like to eat alone, only because I want to eat all of them. But I'm going to share in the spirit of bites, in the spirit of parties. I will share these with some of the fine people making Bake It Up a Notch with me today.